Contained but Unrestrained, Chapter 2, Confrontation, by FckYeahGallavich. Ian slept fitfully, anxiety crowding his stomach and raising his heart into his throat. At one point in the night, he heard Mickey's deep, slow breaths deepen into light snores. This calmed him minimally because, if he closed his eyes, he could transport back in time to when he heard those snores every night, back when he was undoubtedly happiest. Ian just finished putting Yevgeny to sleep. The kid was in the middle of a fussy phase where he refused to go to sleep at a reasonable time. He'd cry and cry as Ian walked him around the house, speaking gently to him. After a half hour or so, the kid would slowly nod off in his arms. Ian quietly entered their bedroom and quickly stripped off his t-shirt and jeans. Mickey was lounging on the bed, naked except for a sheet pulled up to his waist, flipping through a magazine. "About fucking time," Mickey grumbled. "You could try it," Ian replied with an eye roll, shedding his boxers and climbing into bed. Mickey snorted and tossed his magazine to the bedside table, and Ian grinned. He loved rocking their son to sleep just as much as he loved climbing into bed to talk or make love or whatever they felt like doing in the comfort of their room, covered by the warm feeling of knowing everyone was in bed, safe and happy. They settled under the sheet and turned to face each other, but didn't touch. "He might like it if you're there with me," Ian hinted softly. Mickey averted his eyes awkwardly. "I know you don't like being around him much, but he loves you." Mickey made a noise almost like a mix of pain and disbelief, and Ian backed off. "Okay, it's just an idea." Mickey nodded and leaned forward to kiss Ian gently. They made love that night, so soft, so gentle, Ian could have sworn they were floating. When they finished, Mickey wrapped his arm over Ian's chest, wrapping his fingers over his shoulder, and fell asleep with his head resting on Ian's chest. Mickey was so worn out he fell asleep almost immediately. This was their routine. Ian put Yevy to sleep if Svet wasn't there, and after they made love, sometimes rough and or kinky, and sometimes soft and loving like tonight, Mickey always fell asleep afterward. Mickey didn't always snore, but when he did, it was like a low grumble in his chest. It reminded Ian of when Mickey mumbled grumpily to himself, except followed by the whistle of air blowing between his minimally parted lips. Ian was always so confused when people complained about their partners snoring because Mickey's was so adorable and, in an odd way, comforting. It was a sound that told him Mickey was sleeping soundly and that he was breathing well. It was a sound that told him he had nothing to worry about. He'd rather listen to Mickey breathe, feel his body expand with each inhale and collapse with each exhale, feel every twitch in his muscles as he dreamed and soothe him when it felt like he was having a nightmare, than just about anything else at this time of night. Ian would eventually fall asleep, of course, but for those 20 minutes or so, he loved watching Mickey sleep and holding his solid form in his hands. He snapped his burning eyes open and choked back a sob. It had been a long time since he'd thought about his estranged stepson and about life at the Milkovich house. And in this moment, he had never yearned for something so desperately in his life. He wanted it so badly he choked on it, like that desire was suffocating him. He bit his fist, trying to keep quiet so as not to wake Mickey, but he heard Mickey's snores stop and the mattress rustle as he sat up beneath him. Ian covered his eyes in humiliation. "Oh, fuck, man," Mickey groaned from beneath him. "I know," Ian mumbled back. "You've been in this shit before," Mickey griped over the sound of the nylon crinkling as he swung his body around and stood up. Suddenly, he was by the head of Ian's bed, his eyes bleary from sleep, but also concern. "I think I just didn't realize how much I missed you until now. I didn't really let myself think about you or us, when I got home, because I thought I'd never see you again. So I just didn't let myself miss you for a while and move on. It's just hitting me all at once, I guess. Mickey's brows furrowed. You missed me, and so you're crying about it now, with me in the bunk under you? Mickey asked, his tone conveying that he kind of thought Ian was being ridiculous. This was fair because Ian knew he was being ridiculous. I know. It's just a lot to suddenly have you back and realize that there might be a chance of us being together outside. I really never thought that would ever happen, Ian replied quietly, turning onto his side to look down directly into Mickey's eyes, which he averted, his jaw set tight. Uh-oh. Couldn't you realize that without the fucking waterworks? Mickey finally asked after a moment of chewing over his words, looking back to Ian. Ian laughed a little and wiped his eyes again. What's reminiscing about rocking Yevgeny to sleep and sleeping in your bed every night without you? Ian meant it as a joke, but it wasn't a very good one. Mickey narrowed his eyes in confusion. Why the fuck were you thinking about that? I didn't mean to, just listening to you snore reminded me of that. I don't think I've been that happy since then, Ian replied shyly. Well, you'll be blessed to know you get to listen to me snore for the next 2 years, so there's no need to go fucking crying about it, he snarked. Ian grinned at Mickey's teasing and sat up a little on his forearms. And you get to put up with my emotional ass every time these fucking bills need to be adjusted, so buckle up, Ian laughed. Mickey shrugged, but smiled fondly. Lady at the clinic said 30 to 40, right? Ian's breath caught at the meaning behind Mickey's memory. Mickey had been fully prepared to stick it through with him for 30 to 40 years before, and clearly that hadn't changed. Gonna be able to put up with my shitty puns for the next 2 years, though? You're not used to them, so you might have lost your tolerance, Ian joked further. Mickey's smile deepened. Please, 2 years ain't enough for me to forget how to deal with those. I've been putting up with that for years, and you'll still be doing it 10 years from now. I can handle it. Ian laughed, but then suddenly grew solemn. 10 years? How much time do you have? Ian asked, suddenly realizing Mickey had never said. Mickey averted his eyes. Mick, don't panic, princess. You won't have to wait that long before getting this ass again, he griped resentfully. Ian blinked rapidly in surprise. Where the fuck did that come from? I wasn't panicking. I was just asking a fucking question. Mickey visibly bit the inside of his cheek. Mickey, I get we have shit to talk about, but can't you just give it to me straight? How much time did you get? I struck a good deal, Mickey finally allowed. Ian raised his brows to egg him on. Mickey sighed. I handed them the leader of the cartel and the major storehouse I worked at, so they busted a lot of members. So that buys them time to track down other members. Mickey. Ian dropped his voice low. He almost sounded stern, but really he was now panicked that it was 10 years. 5 years with good behavior, he finally blurted out. Ian's lungs collapsed in his chest. 5. Better than 8, right? Mickey replied resentfully. And 2 of them, you'll be in here with me, so you're only looking at 3 years on your own. He sounded like that kind of angry when he was feeling scared. Christ. Mickey was afraid Ian was going to leave him behind again. Mick, it's the best I could get. The court-appointed guy actually gave a shit, and he was actually good, so he actually tried. Could have been 10 years, no parole. Why are you defending this so hard? I just hate that you're going to be in here after I get out, that's all. He swiftly slid back to the floor to face his partner. Because I'm not getting back in this shit if you're just going to pretend I don't exist when you get out. I'm done being ghosted. I came back to see if you wanted to give it another shot, yeah.
but mostly because only God knows how you're going to do in here for 2 years with that fairy messiah title over your head. But we're settling this now. You think I'm just going to leave you behind? Haven't exactly shown me that you wouldn't. I just had to know you were going to be okay and know that it was over. Over? Ian cried, actually feeling a lump raised to his throat. Mickey, where the fuck is this even coming from? 2 hours ago, I thought everything was going to be okay. Mickey gazed intently in Ian's eyes. Ian really was starting to panic. He just got Mickey back, and things were already falling apart? Say that now. I don't want to believe that. But I can't spend 3 years in this place without a visit, or a call, or some sort of promise that you're going to be there when I get out. I was always there when you got out, Ian cried. Mickey rolled his eyes and gave Ian a look that told him he'd better rethink that. Ian averted his eyes as though non-verbally, saying he retracted his statement. We have a lot to talk about. And as happy as I am to see you again, and even though I'm going to watch your back in here, I need to know that you're in before I put myself out there for you again. Ian glanced to the bed they'd just made love in and furrowed his brow. So that warm feeling had only been on his side? Mickey didn't return that feeling anymore? Ian was so fucking confused, he couldn't even wrap his head around this sudden change. But none of that mattered. Mickey wasn't convinced that Ian was here to stay, and if he was being fair, Mickey wasn't exactly unreasonable in that concern. How can I show it to you? Ian whispered into the quiet. Mickey bit his lip. I don't know. I just hoped when I decided to come back that by the time you get out, I'll be convinced. But I'm telling you here and now, I'm done with taking chances on your ass. Ian nodded slowly. Back on my meds now. I really am. So, that's one fight out of the way. He meant it as a joke, but Mickey's face didn't budge, so he clearly didn't take it as one. You also left me at the border when you were on your meds, Mickey murmured after an awkward beat of silence. He didn't even sound angry this time, just hurt. Ian had never felt more gutted straight to the core. Mick, rotation's gonna send someone up here soon, I'll bet. We don't want to be squaring off when the officer walks by, Mickey grumbled, his face hardening in that way that said, conversation closed. Tomorrow. We'll talk tomorrow, whatever you need. Ian knew he had to convince Mickey once and for all that this was it. He was it for him. He tried other partners. He tried moving on. He tried forgetting, and no matter how he hardened himself or distanced himself, the thug was still under his skin. And this was the first time he was seeing how badly he'd hurt Mickey. This was going to be even more complicated than Ian had thought.
It would shock absolutely no one to discover Mickey Milkovich doesn't do displays of emotion. Mickey Milkovich doesn't do tears or profuse apologies, and talking shit out gives him the jitters. So being woken up to the love of his life in tears and shaking from the effort of trying not to let Mickey know he was crying was the most uncomfortable experience he'd had in a while. And he'd just been fucked without lube. He didn't mean to say all of that shit or start a fight. It all just came out without his permission. The idea that Ian could possibly miss their old life so much simply from hearing him snore, and after ignoring his existence while he'd been locked up, it rubbed him the wrong way. When he'd set up this deal, he didn't know this simmering resentment existed. All he'd thought about was how much Ian needed his help, and he came running like a trained dog. It was pathetic, but Mickey was used to being pathetic for Ian Gallagher. He didn't even know why he was so angry when 2 days ago he'd been so excited about seeing Ian again he hadn't been able to see. But for all of his sudden anger, Mickey knew he wanted to work it out. That was why he came back. That was why he always would come back. Because he was fucking ruined for anyone else. Trust, he tried. And he could see how Ian still loved him each time they reunited. If it weren't for that look, the look like Mickey was Ian's center of gravity, Mickey would be able to move on. But Ian always looked at him like Mickey hung his favorite star. And maybe that's because, if he could, he would. They had a lot of shit to discuss, apparently, Mickey realized as he tossed and turned through the rest of the night. Before he put all of his hopes into this relationship again, he needed to know that Ian was going to stay on his meds, and that once he was, that he wouldn't wisen up and leave him as soon as he got out. As hard as 8 years had looked, it had been bearable when Ian visited. Then out of nowhere, nothing. Mickey couldn't take 3 years in here hoping that Ian would visit, hoping he would still be there for him. He already felt resentment building at the thought of Ian leaving him behind again, of turning himself in, sacrificing his freedom and safety for someone who might just leave him here to rot alone. Again. But he needed to stop himself. Things could change, and getting pissed at Ian for something he hadn't even done yet was unfair. He was taking a chance on love, and if Ian didn't meet him halfway, that was as much his fault as Ian's. Ian's deep breaths sounded from the top bunk, and Mickey's heart prickled in his chest as he remembered Ian crying earlier. This wasn't the first time the Gallagher had lost it in front of him, and knowing his emotional ass, it wouldn't be the last. Mickey really didn't mind the waterworks as much as he let on. It's just that hearing Ian lose his shit like that made him want to tear out whatever it was of himself that would replace what was broken inside Ian. He would rip out his own heart for Ian. When Ian would cry for days on end from his depression, Mickey had wanted to trade bodies so badly. He had wrapped himself around Ian's body as though being near him for long enough, they would somehow share that pain. He found out later that Ian hated being touched when he was sick, so Mickey never did it again. But it pained him to not touch him when he was like that. And in this case, it pained him because he was so fucking angry. And yet, he couldn't focus on his anger at Ian when Ian was agonizing over something. Nothing would get resolved, and Mickey would put his heart on the line again. Not again. If Ian was only intending on having them be together while they were both here, Mickey would be fine with that. He would serve his 3 years alone, serve his parole time, and leave Chicago again, never looking back. All he needed was for Ian to tell him that. Honesty, that was what they needed. Mickey had never lied to Ian before, well, not since he came out. And even before then, it was always more of a denial more so than actual lying. Plus, it's not like he had been fooling anyone. Mickey huffed and flipped to his side. The truth was, he was fooling himself if he really thought he could hold this grudge up for long. Last time they saw each other, Mickey had been angry about being abandoned too. Yet all he said on the matter? He never fucking visited me. And a punch to the arm. Ian hadn't even provided a solid excuse, and Mickey was ready to move on. Well, not this time. This time, Mickey was going to stand firm. Ian was going to be honest with him and let him know what his plans were, and what's more, he wasn't going to let Ian lie to himself. Maybe Ian was convinced for now that he wasn't going to abandon Mickey again, but now Mickey needed proof. Real and solid proof that Ian meant it this time. And one way or another, Mickey was going to harden himself against Ian Gallagher because he didn't know if he could handle being left behind again, with or without honest preparation. Mickey woke up with the lights blaring on, sore and grumpy as fuck. Ian sniffed above him and sat up, his feet dangling in the center of the bunk. Mickey was so tempted to touch his feet affectionately, remind the recently de-redded redhead that he was there, but reminded himself of the promise he made to himself and solidified his resolve. Ian jumped down from the bunk and pawed at his uniform to start pulling it on. Mickey sat up and hissed a bit at the sting in his ass. Ugh. Okay, so going at it even as slowly as they did was probably not one of their smartest ideas. Ian flashed around and blearily searched his face. "You alright?" he asked, sticking a leg drunkenly through the wrong side of the pants. Yeah, just sore," Mickey replied, sitting up and rubbing at his eyes. Yeah, we gotta track down some lube, huh?" Mickey arched a brow at him, conveying how ridiculous that idea was. "What? No one uses lube here?" Mickey shrugged and stood up. Ian tossed him his uniform and finished pulling on his own. Mickey slowly put his own on, standing up as he pulled them up his legs. "What'd you use?" Ian asked as he finished sticking his arms through the sleeves. Mickey shimmied into the suit and started pulling on the sleeves too, and focused intently on the task. Lotion, Vaseline. Didn't really work that great, but it was what we had." Mickey finally raised his eyes to look at Ian, who grimaced. "Yeah, that stuff's not really for internal use, man." Mickey shrugged, and Ian bit his lip. They were both fully dressed and standing in the middle of their cell, trying not to look like they were trying not to look at each other. "I'm, sorry about last night," Ian mumbled. Mickey looked up to face him with a little gasp of breath, like he was trying to stop himself from saying the first thing that came to his head, even though he hadn't really thought anything. He released the breath and shrugged again. We really need to talk," Mickey finally replied firmly. Ian nodded and looked like he was about to reach for Mickey when the door opened. This time, the guard didn't hang around to give them orders, assuming they knew what to do. Ian held back as Mickey marched to the door. He turned back to face him in confusion for a moment before he remembered that Ian had to wait for his meds. "Want me to, Ian shook his head and gestured for him to go. When Mickey didn't, Ian furrowed his brow. "I'm not going to dump him or anything." Mickey almost felt bad that Ian offered, but with Ian's history of dumping his meds, it was actually really comforting. He didn't want Ian to feel like Mickey was doing the prison equivalent of counting his pills, but if Ian offered, right? He backtracked into the cell and stood on the opposite side as they waited for the nurse. It was an awkward silence that neither of them knew how to fill, and Ian seemed really down about it, biting his lip and trying not to look like he was fighting for words. Mickey wished he could relieve that tension for him, but didn't have any clues as to how. He was suffocated by the need to comfort and throttle him. Mickey finally just stuck his head out the door and saw the nurse guy all the way down at the end, taking his sweet-ass time, and crossed to the toilet to relieve himself. Ian just stared straight ahead until Mickey tucked himself away and flushed. Ian had to shift over to let Mickey wash his hands, which forced them to close quarters. Neither of them backed away, even after Mickey's hands were dry. They just watched each other warily. "Are we gonna be okay?" Ian finally whispered. Mickey fought his instinct to say, "Yeah, we're fine," because they weren't. "I want to work on it," Mickey finally replied after a moment. "Do you?" Ian nodded. Mickey nodded in return, and they again just stood close, absorbing each other's warmth in the cold cell. That cocoon from last night seemed to envelop around them now. Was that warm shell always there, or was this new? Mickey remembered it in the van when they were in reunion mode again. How he felt so warm and solid and safe in Ian's arms, so protective as he wrapped his arms around him too. How they were in a bubble where no one could touch them so long as they were joined, as he flipped Ian over. "Gallagher," the nurse called as he approached the door, snapping both of them out of their trace. Ian turned to face the guy and accepted his cup with a quiet thanks. Once his pills were securely placed on the sink, he raised his brows at Mickey like, "You ready to go?" Mickey led the way down to breakfast. They gathered their trays in silence and found a pair of seats where they could sit side by side. Though Mickey really didn't want to give the impression that they were all good, he definitely let his outer thigh brush Ian's once they sat down. Breakfast was hardly breakfast, but it was arguably the most edible food in this place. Even still, Ian glared at the barely toasted bread and margarine, box of fake fruit juice, and sausage that likely wasn't real sausage. Ian repressed a sigh as he picked up his fork to poke at the sausage-shaped stuff, and Mickey suppressed a laugh. Marcus didn't join them this time, opting to sit with a table of burly guys this time, who kept eyes locked on the couple. Mickey pointedly ignored the stares, though, and out of the corner of his eye, he noticed Ian sizing them up. "When we're out here, we're cellmates, and that's as far as our relationship goes," Mickey murmured without looking at Ian. "We're good friends at most. Remember what I said about propositions in juvie? It's not exactly the same, but it's still not a good idea to be obvious." Ian remained mostly still, picking at his bread. "I mean, people here already know who I am, so is there any point in hiding it? You don't want anyone using our relationship against us. It's not even that we're gay. We're in a small block, so things get boring around here. People look for excuses to start fights, just to fuck with other people because they can. Some of the guys in here are lifers, so they don't have a whole lot to lose." Ian sighed in acknowledgement. Mickey raised the box of juice to his lips and took a resentful sip, and Ian finally took a mouthful of toast. It barely even crunched against his teeth and looked wholly unsatisfying. He could see Ian's eyes roll behind closed lids as he chewed mournfully. "Should probably keep the gay Jesus bullshit as low-key as possible. For right now, the guys want to laugh at you for it. Best keep it that way." Ian nodded, but clearly was unhappy about it. They ate the rest of their food in quiet. Didn't exactly take long, and Mickey finally broke the silence that was just starting to get weird. "We get to go out to the yard today, so at least you get to go outside again." "Didn't even have to wait 24 hours, Mickey said, shoving Ian playfully. "Lucky me," Ian replied sarcastically. Mickey shrugged and grinned. "It's going to be so boring in here without being able to work." Mickey rolled his eyes and shrugged again to show that, yes, it was boring. He gave Ian a meaningful look, though, trying to convey through his eyes that it was going to be better for them both this time because they were together. They still had shit to work out, but Mickey knew they would. That was why he was okay with switching gears like this. He knew everything would work out, so when they were out here, he could just enjoy having Ian back, and while they were in their cell, they would deal with their shit. "Need to try tracking down some loot today," Mickey grumbled under his breath. Ian grimaced. "Sorry, man." Mickey rolled his eyes and shrugged. "Just gotta get some before going at it again," Mickey said easily with a shrug. Ian furrowed his brow. "You can't get some in here? You made it sound like you had some last time you were in, so I assumed you knew how to get it." "Well, in that other block, sure. There were more guys, and it wasn't exactly high security." Mickey laughed. "We ain't either. Besides, there are expert smugglers everywhere. Just gotta know where to find them." "Gonna raise any flags?" Mickey shook his head. "Shouldn't. Guys ask for condoms all the time. Slick shouldn't be any weirder. Though I don't guess anyone in here has asked before." Ian nodded, then narrowed his eyes. Mickey followed Ian's line of sight to see him locking eyes with one of the burly guys Mickey hadn't learned the name of yet. "Quit staring, moron. You want to fucking start something?" "There ain't much I can do for you if all his friends jump in." "He keeps staring at you," Ian replied irritatedly. "Me? The fuck he was?" But he glanced at the guy for a brief second all the same. He couldn't tell who the guy was staring at. Maybe both of them. Yeah, they needed to play their shit cool if they were already drawing attention. "Whatever, let's go get your meds," Mickey breathed under his breath, standing up with his tray to dump it. Ian followed suit, and Mickey started musing to himself if it was better or worse for gay Jesus to look like he was his bitch. He never felt the need to watch after someone in here before, so this was a new scenario for him, and one he'd never foreseen before. Plus, the fact that Ian was a high-profile case, and he was too, really, put a different spin on things that was outside Mickey's experience. Fuck, how to play this. They climbed up to their cell, and Mickey discreetly watched Ian take his pills, though he was so open about it that Mickey suspected Ian made it easy for him to make it look discreet. He wouldn't do this forever, it just made him feel better to know that Ian was taking them of his own accord and without a fight. He'd never gotten to see Ian do that, so he didn't know what it was like yet. He trashed the little cup of his meds were in and turned to face Mickey. "How long till yard time?" he asked. Mickey crouched to get an eye at the clock on the wall downstairs. "Not for a few hours. We start rotation at around noon." Ian got an anxious look on his face from that. "Okay, so what do you want to do until then?" Mickey's stomach fluttered a bit with anxiety, too. At the awkward silence, Ian looked like he was just ready to babble. "I mean, are we allowed to stay up here so we can talk? Will anyone bother us?" "You're ready to talk now?" Ian swallowed at what Mickey guessed was an anxious lump at his throat, the same one Mickey was fighting the urge to swallow against as well. "Better now than just having it hover," Ian replied nervously. Mickey nodded slowly and rolled into his bunk, legs outstretched in front of him. Ian followed suit with the opposite side. He placed his feet on either side of Mickey's legs and leaned against the wall, then waited patiently for Mickey to speak. "I don't know what to say," Mickey finally admitted, rubbing his upper lip nervously. Ian rubbed at the pants of his uniform in a similar gesture. "Well, you had plenty to say last night," Ian grumbled. And just like that, Mickey's irritation flamed up. He furrowed his brow and stared hard at this fucking asshole of a lover. "What, because I'm not taking this shit anymore?" Ian sighed, closed his eyes, and rested his head back against the wall. "It's just a pretty big difference between last night and this morning, okay? Kinda got mixed signals from that," Ian reasoned gently. Mickey rested back against the wall and forced himself to calm down. Yeah, he could see how his different reactions to Ian would be confusing as fuck. That was fair. After a beat, Ian suggested, "Why don't you tell me what you're upset about, and we'll address that and go from there." Mickey laughed without humor. It was rude, and he knew it was, but not fucking sorry. As reasonable as that suggestion was, it was also fucking ridiculous, because where the fuck to start? Okay, I got it." Mickey crossed his legs and sat up, leaning closer to Ian's bubble. Ian didn't move. His attention remained securely on Mickey's face, ready to receive. "How about what the fuck you were doing the year that I was locked away in this shithole and you didn't bother to fucking visit me?" Ian clenched his eyes shut in clear shame. "I already told you. Too fucking hard? Are you fucking kidding me with that shit?" Mickey seethed. Ian flinched. "You want to know what was hard, Ian? Being in here. Not knowing where the fuck we stand, not knowing if I was ever going to see you again, not knowing where the fuck I went wrong. Not knowing why the fuck you left me alone in here." Ian looked like he wanted desperately to interrupt, but was allowing Mickey to get it all out. Mickey stopped, though, wanting to hear what Ian had to say now. "I'm sorry, Mickey," he replied meekly. Mickey rolled his eyes. "No, you're not getting off that easily. You tell me. What the fuck happened?" It was a struggle to keep his voice down because he didn't want to attract the attention of the guards. I didn't want to take the meds. I really didn't. And Fiona gave me an ultimatum. Either I take them, or I go back to the hospital and get them back in my system. And I knew that if I had to be committed, that I wouldn't get out of there until they wanted me out, and God knows how long that would be, you know? So I started taking them, and seeing you there, those couple of visits, was just... It was so fucking hard because it felt like my fault, and I couldn't live with the guilt. So I convinced myself that you got yourself in that position. It made it easier for me to just say, fuck that part of my life, it's over, than to face you. Ian couldn't look him in the eye the whole time he admitted this. shame coloring his face pink.
I left you alone in here, alright? And nothing can make up for that. I'm just so sorry, Mick.
Mickey nodded, and yet he still wasn't done. Then I gave you chance after chance to tell me goodbye, to tell me that you were done. I asked each fucking time we met up. I had every intention of going. I really did. It wasn't until we were there at the border that I realized I couldn't go, I swear. I didn't mean to drag you along. I really did mean that apology. I really did, and I still do. Mickey bit his lip resentfully.
Mick, you don't think I'm going to leave you alone after this, do you?
He didn't feel the again was necessary. I didn't think you were going to leave me alone the first time, or the Mexican fucking border either, but I would have gotten us killed. I thought I was doing what was best for both of us, Ian cried, drawing his legs in to match Mickey's position. Yeah, your got my shit together brain realized it would be a stupid idea to come with me, and you let me cross the border alone after spending 3 days thinking we were getting a new start. Ian froze before him, so lost of what he could possibly say next. He stuttered a little bit before Mickey cut in again. You really had your shit together, huh? Mickey spit. At the time, yeah, Ian replied desperately. For 4 more fucking months. You've spent the past year unmedicated, Ian. I was gone, and I thought you were okay with a fucking boyfriend and on your meds and building up your stupid savings account again with your fucking job, and that almost made escaping worth it. It almost made going to Mexico alone worth it because I knew you were okay and we got to spend a few days living like old times. Who gives a flying fuck what happens to me so long as you're okay? I do. What were you doing joining a fucking Mexican cartel? You know how dangerous that is for a white American guy? Especially somebody from the Ukrainian mob? His tone shifted, anger taking over the former desperation. That's why they took me on. I had family trade secrets, and when those worked, they hired me on full time. Turns out Damon was connected to this guy too, so me knowing him didn't hurt. Ian's eyes popped open with his mouth, which opened and closed as he fought for words. The guy we abandoned in a fucking parking lot where he probably got picked up? Are you fucking kidding me? You used Damon's name to get in with the cartel and then turned on them? Mickey. Ian's face suddenly lost all signs of anger as fear, raw fear, took over. Mickey would have been touched by the concern if not for his raw anger and resentment. At least I never forgot who the fuck I am. You, with this gay Jesus fucking queer messiah bullshit? Where the fuck did that come from? Ian flushed in embarrassment and sank back against the wall again. I went head to head with a homophobic preacher. Some people started following me after. I didn't choose it. Well, you didn't fucking fight it, Mickey snapped. Ian sighed. That's what the therapist guy here said. Mickey's brows shot up like saying, well then there you go, asshole. Ian didn't say anything after that, and just watched as Mickey ran his fingers through his hair in frustration. Christ, Ian. You're supposed to be okay. You were supposed to go home and get your superhero kicks from saving people with your proper fucking job. You were supposed to go on like you did before. I'm sorry, Ian erupted desperately. They sat facing each other in silence, eyes drilling into each other's, both slightly panting and waiting for a guard to come running or for the other one to speak first. The tension slowly eased from Mickey's face, the anger draining from his eyes. I'm sorry, Ian repeated in a choked whisper. You have no idea how hard it is to stay on that shit when you know it's holding you back from the high of your life and you don't even need drugs for it. You just feel so good and strong and capable. And when the only reason you're on this shit is to make life easier for the people around you, when this crap makes you feel like you're underwater half the time, it's really, really hard to fight the urge to say fuck it especially when no one around you seems to care about how you're feeling one way or the other. I missed you, and I was sick of feeling nothing. Mickey surged forward and wrapped his arms around Ian, dragging his face to his neck. Ian wrapped his arms around Mickey, his fist clutching in his uniform to desperately hold on as he finally sobbed. Okay. Mickey sighed over Ian's shoulder. Okay. Ian nodded, though Mickey wasn't entirely sure what he was nodding at. He held Ian for as long as he felt he could, but did eventually have to break away, cautious of the fact that their door was open and inmates were able to wander. Mickey sat closer to Ian, but kept enough distance so it didn't look like lovers patching up after an argument, but cellmates getting to know each other. The gay Jesus crap was over. Ian rolled his eyes and laughed without humor as he nodded and wiped his eyes. I really don't know how I can make it up to you, leaving you alone like that. I don't know if you can, Mickey admitted solemnly. Ian closed his eyes and nodded. Mickey exhaled sharply. I just need time, okay? To get over it, to trust you again. Ian nodded, sniffling and wiping his nose pathetically. Mickey's heart broke for him, but he still knew this wasn't the end of this discussion. There was too much between them right now, and one confrontation was not enough to patch it up. I think it's safe to say we've both changed a lot in the past few years. Ian remained still, but was clearly listening as he stared straight ahead over his knees, which he had drawn to his chest. So, let's get to know each other again. Catch up and give all the details of what we missed. Ian looked wary at that suggestion, but didn't fight him, eventually nodding. Ian sat sniffling for a little bit, and Mickey let him gather his pride. It was really hard to hold on to your dignity when you were sniffing back snot and wiping your tears. Luckily, very few inmates walked by, and those that did hardly looked in, if at all. Who's first? Ian asked confidently. End of chapter 2.
Hello again, all. A new author's note because I listened to it trying to get ready to start working on this project again over my summer, and I realized that there were a lot of mistakes. So I went back and re-edited it, and so here I am once again saying hello and thank you to everyone who has continued to show support for this project. And I really hope that when I say I promise to work on it and be more consistent, that I actually mean it this time. The funny thing is, when I was recording this chapter the first time, I was going through my own breakup with a partner of 10 years. And so when I said in the original author's note that I got really passionate during their argument, it's because I really was in the thick of my own conversations like that, and obviously it didn't work out the way I wanted to, so it was kind of nice to see the fruition of these kinds of conversations in a positive way, right? Because they do eventually work out their stuff. Spoiler alert. So it's interesting listening to it now, and the fact that I'm going to continue reading it now, that it's been 4 years since the breakup. I'm mostly over everything that happened. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how I, as a narrator, kind of take on those feelings that I had back then that, helped me feel like I brought this to life. I don't know if anyone else feels that I did that or not, but
I just remember when I was originally writing this, Bestie and I, Eli and I, talking about how can they really come back from where they left us off in season 7. There's just so much for them to talk about, so many trust issues to get past, and they kind of touched on it in season 10, totally abandoned it by season 11. And it always really bothered me that they didn't really address the deep-rooted issues. So instead we get an orgy, right? But yeah, so for those who have already read, I really appreciate the comments where, for the most part, I think people appreciated the direction that this was going. And for people who are new, welcome again. And I hope that you do appreciate the direction that this series goes. My number one priority following what we thought at the time was Endgame was to ensure that both Ian and Mickey are heard, both of their scars are honored, and that they both put in effort to fix it. So it isn't just a Mickey sacrifices everything, comes back, and forgives Ian for everything because Ian was going through a hard time, because that's bullshit. That's absolute bullshit. So basically, I really hope that you guys like how this series goes. I originally had imagined this being a trilogy, but we'll see. But yeah, so I hope you really enjoyed this chapter, and I will try, now that my thesis is pretty much done, I defend next week, so wish me luck on that, and I'll be trying to update as consistently as possible.